So last time I talked about homebrew and my thoughts on it and how I think it's perfectly fine and normal for the tabletop hobby. If you don't like homebrew, that's fine. You don't have to use it. And today I want to talk about consistency because if we're going to be making up things in our games and throwing them in there, consistency needs to be a part of it. Now, and I'm not talking about consistency of storytelling. Internal logic in stories is a different topic, and I'll probably make a video about that at some point. I'm talking about rules consistency. A lot of times I run across the term rules versus rulings, or rulings over rules, or however it's worded in whatever book it's written in. There's been a trend of rulings over rules. The GM makes a decision, you roll with it. Perfectly fine. I like this. The drawback to that is consistency. If you're going to make a ruling, you probably need to write it down. And I'm going to give an example. Some of the lighter rule systems, they don't have their conditions written out of what these conditions mean. Blinded. It says the character is blinded. What does that mean? The rules don't say. They expect the GM to come up with what blinded means. Fine. Come up with what it means. In your system, does it mean disadvantage? Does it mean you always miss? Whatever you decide is, but you need to write it down and be consistent with it. If you're blind over here and you're blind over there and they work differently, unless you can give the players a reason why they work differently, you really shouldn't be doing that. And the reason it's not to take away the fun or the creativity from the GM is to build character trust or player trust. If you say it works one way here and one way there and one way over there, they don't know what to expect. Now, there is a caveat. If you have a reason in your story why it's different, tell them. It's like, hey, I know it worked this way before, and I acknowledge that's the way it's going to work, but this is a different scenario. Your characters just don't know what's different about it yet, but there's a reason for it. That's fine. But if you're coming up with this condition works differently in every scenario, that doesn't help with player trust. And you need more player trust in your game rather than less, because we're always fighting the whole, the GM's our enemy feeling from the players, or at least I know I fight that from a lot of my players from time to time. And it's not just conditions. It could be, does breaking down a door always make noise? Most of the time it should make a noise, but if not, use your game, rule it the way you want to. But the point I'm trying to make, at least for GMs, is consistency. If you're going to make a decision, and it's going to be one of those things that keeps coming back over and over and over again, write it down somewhere. Make sure you remember it. Make sure your players remember it. Funny enough, what you've now done is made a rule. So you've made a ruling, you've written it down, and you've made a rule. That's the thing about the rulings and the rules type of approach, is they kind of go hand in hand one way or the other. The rules approach, more rules, is more consistency. The ruling approach is more flexibility, but it's kind of on the GM to make the consistency that needs to be there. If you're playing a game where everything changes all the time and your players are okay with that and you're okay with that, do it. But if you find that your players are getting frustrated because you're playing a game that has a lot of rulings versus rules, you might want to ask them, it's like, hey, am I being consistent with this? And once again, I'm not talking about story consistency. If you want to have a world where all goblins are evil, that's a story consistency thing. But for a rules versus rulings thing, it's like all goblins are evil and they have dark vision. Now you're talking about kind of a rules thing. If they all have dark vision, be consistent with it. If you have a goblin who doesn't have dark vision, that's a story bit that you can throw in there, but it's inconsistency, and you need to explain it in the story or the lore of the world why that inconsistency makes sense. It's the inconsistencies that lets you build uniqueness into your characters, into your stories, and into your adventures. And I am going to do a video about uniqueness in design for encounters and locations, but yes, so if you don't have the consistency, it can be a bad thing. If you've learned that you can set up the consistency, you can work around it and build unique story aspects. One of the things my players ask me from time to time is, hey, we're in this fight. I'd like to target the character's knee or his neck or head or something. None of the games I run have rules for targeting body parts. And I thought about it and I said, okay, if I say yes to this, they're going to ask me this question every single time. So I say no every time that question comes up. You can't do this. And I tell them, I was like, if the whole group wants this to be part of the game, that's fine. However, it's not fair if you're allowed to do it and the enemies aren't allowed to target your vital organs. So do you want them to be able to go for your throat every time? Or do you want it to be the way it is? It's a little bit less bookkeeping. Yes, it's not quite as realistic, but I've kind of kept that same answer as you can do it if the enemies can do it. You can do it if the enemies can do it. And they have gotten to the point now where when a question comes up, inevitably somebody even knows what I'm going to say and they just move on because it's a consistent thing. It's something I didn't want to deal with in my games. It's too complicated in my opinion. And it works out. And if I let it happen one time, I need to give a reason. It's like, okay, this is a Hydra. It's how this enemy probably needs to be addressed. And it's kind of on me to say, okay, this is an exception to the rules. Here's why it's an exception. Now we're going to move forward. It takes 30 seconds or less. And it lets them know that, okay, the rules are slightly different now. We're going outside the norm and we're going to work with it. Like I said, it makes for unique and interesting encounters when you break those on purpose. It's just being intentional about it. So yeah, some tables, they like things where anything is possible. I don't run an anything is possible game. I very much run the world has its own logic and we're not going to break the logic unless there's a really good reason. I don't believe if you roll a 20, you can shoot an arrow and hit the moon. I'll just say you can't do that. I don't even let you roll the dice. I'm consistent about it. So if you're having trouble with players, not really trouble with players, but your players are seeming confused why it works this way or not that way, you might just reevaluate, are you being consistent? So yeah, I think going forward I'm going to do a video on uniqueness and encounters, and I'm going to do a video kind of character development for players because most of my content I think will probably end up being GM based because I'm never really a player and always a GM, so I have more to say about that, but I'll probably be making those in the future.